Hello everyone, I'm here to give some direction on how to update the firmware on the Microsoft Azure Kinect. So this camera here. And so we'll update the firmware because there is an updated firmware version for the camera, and I'll just go through the tool to first view the firmware and view to make sure that all of the sensors on the Kinect are working, and then I'll go through how to install the new firmware on the camera. So first, all the links will be provided below the video, but first we'll go to the page. So either you can click on the link below or search on Google, update Azure Kinect, and it will bring you to this page that was written in 2019, but it still holds true. And you'll click on this first. You can read through it, but I'll be going through it pretty much. So you first click on this link to download the SDK. First of all, the requirement, you have to be on a Windows machine for this, and you will have to have admin access because you will be installing programs. So we'll click on the download, and that will bring you to this page. And what we'll want to do is we'll find the installation details, which are here, and this will bring you to the GitHub page where you just want to select the most recent Azure Kinect SDK. And at the time of recording, it's 1.4.1. And if you click on this, it will also install or give you the latest firmware file to install on the Azure Kinect. So once we click this, it will download, and it's an executable. So once it's finished downloading, you can launch it, and it should launch the installer where you just agree. You can read through the terms and license, or you can just click agree, and you click install. And it will give you some warning to make sure that you do have admin access. Once that's finished, it will tell you the installation is successfully complete. Now, we're just going to go back to this page. And if you're on a Windows 10 machine, if you click on the Start menu in the lower left, you can just type Azure, start typing Azure, and it should give you the option, the Azure Kinect Viewer. So if we click on that, it will bring up the Azure Kinect Viewer program, and we can see up here, we see that there's a serial number up here for open device, and there's only the one. If for some reason you don't see this device, here I'm going to unplug the camera, and if I refresh, it'll say no device is available. If that happens, it might mean that your Azure Kinect isn't plugged in. So when it's plugged in and being powered correctly, because I plugged it in, I think my video stopped, so let me just restart. There we go. So when it's plugged in correctly, it's a little bit hard to see, but you should see a white light right there. And so when it's plugged in correctly and you see that white light in back, if you click refresh devices, you should see the serial number up there. And then you can click open device, and it should give you a lot of options here, all of the Azure Kinect options. But what we're looking for down here is the device firmware version. So we can see that the device firmware version, the RGB and the depth camera is at 1.6. And if we go back to that page where we downloaded the firmware version, it looks like this is an older version. Here, I'll bring it up side by side so we can see it. So yeah, 1.6.02, so it looks like we're one version back, so we do need to update it. And another thing that's fun that you won't need to do, but if you hit start here, you'll be able to view all of the output from the sensor. So you can see the camera output, the depth channel, the IMUs, which is the accelerometer on the camera where it can tell if it's tilted. And it also gives you all of the different microphones on the Kinect. So yeah, you can view everything. But we're going to stop this and close this. So we downloaded that. The next thing we're going to do is go through the update. So what you want to do first is go to your C drive, and we're going to go to the place where that program was installed, which is under Program Files. And once you click on the Program Files under the C drive, you should see this Azure Kinect SDK. When you open that, you should see Tools under there, and this is where the firmware update will happen. Now, in order to update the firmware, we have to use terminal commands. So what you can do is either open a terminal by, on the start button down here, typing CMD and just click on the command prompt, or right at the top, you can just type CMD in the bar, the address bar, and that will bring up your terminal. So we will have to go through some terminal commands quick, but it's pretty simple. So what you're doing here is we're just updating the firmware. So what we're going to do is go back to the website. Let me see here. So here, I'm just going to click on this to bring it up. And all of this will be lower below the video, all of the links and things. But you can see the commands here on this web page. And what we're going to do first is just Azure Firmware Tool /Q, or with the flag Q. And what that's going to do is just tell us the firmware versions. So we can see, again, if we go back to the other page, we can see we're one version behind. So we checked this both on the viewer, but you can also check it right here in the command line with the updater tool. So we are one version behind. What's nice is when we downloaded that SDK, it gave us the most recent firmware version here under firmware. And if we go back to the firmware update page, it gives us the command to update, which right here, we want to make sure that we're using the correct firmware version in this command. So if we go back to Notepad, or if we go back to our firmware version, we can see we want to use this file name in this command. So what we're going to do is paste that firmware name in this command. And we want to make sure we're under the firmware directory. Okay, so that's the bin. Now, when you update the firmware, you want to make sure the Kinect is plugged in and powered, and that there's really no chance that the Kinect will lose power. So you want to make sure it's plugged in tightly and kind of put it off to the side where you're not going to touch it and the cord's not going to get unplugged while you're updating the firmware, because that can cause some errors in the camera. So we're going to go back to the command line, and we're going to type that command. We're just going to double check that it's the right version. Yep. So we're going to press enter, and it will tell us what's on the firmware, which is version 1.6.110, and this is what the current firmware version is, 1.6.102. So now it'll tell us that it's updating, and don't unplug the device. It can take a little bit of time, and if you're able to see the back of your Kinect, you'll see that white light that lets you know that the Kinect was powered up should now be flashing back and forth between orange and white. Actually, I think I can just move this. I don't want to move the Kinect camera because there's a chance it might get unplugged. So I'm going to try to move this camera to show. Yep. So you should see that means that it's in the process of updating the firmware. Okay, and we'll give it a couple minutes. Once it's finished, it should give you the final message that it was successful. So we'll wait for that. Okay, now it's resetting. And it reset, so now I see a solid white light, and I get the command line back. So now I can do the query again to check the firmware version, and we can see that it is in fact updated. So that's it, and that's how to update your Azure Kinect. Oh, and it's yeah, it shuts off my camera when it does update and turn the Kinect off and on. There we go, now I'm back. So yeah, let me know if you have any questions, and yeah, feel free to contact me if you need any help.